know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego too. This is Paul and Rupert.
We're back!
Coming out with a brand new thought, covered under the blood in which we were born. So we know how to get to.
Is for bold, A is for active, D is for determined. When you consider King David valiantly, you have an idea and understanding of undertaking this. Stay tuned.
Hallelujah, revive us again.
We are excited to bring fresh commentary, good conversation with two bad men. Boy, you don't want to miss this. Bad Man for Christ. Join us.
Just like Peter when he did his first sermon. As the saying goes, bad men for Christ. That is how we'll be for the rest of our life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our show because you're stuck in the house with nowhere to go.
Welcome to our guests, Facebook, YouTube, and all over the world. We welcome you to another edition of the Bad Man Show.
Amen. The Bad Man Show. I want to welcome you. And I'm Rupert Johnson, one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with my good friend who is to one of my sides. I think this one, no, maybe this one.
Well, I think it's the other side. Huh? Hey, Overseer, I'm so glad to see you. It's good to be back again to another show. On this show, we want to talk about church.
Amen.
So we know there's several different kinds of church. So could you kind of break down the categories of churches that you are familiar with?
So for this conversation, and there might be other categories that people will come up later with, but we'll deal with three simple categories: the traditional church, the in-between, and the modern church. The traditional church we look at as the pew-having, pastor chair, the first lady chair, choir stand church where they straightforward. This is what we were brought up in. This is what we are. Then you have the modern day church, the church that may look more like a concert hall, or does it have a set chair for the pastor, or is it more of a stage and the band is in between and it looks more inviting, that kind of church. And then you have the in-between, which is the church that is stuck in between and dealing with both traditional and modern folks in the church.
Well, Overseer, I guess I'm going to have to say that we are in between somewhere, because we do have the pastor's chair, the first lady chair, and the choir, but you really sit in them because they're just up in the podium and we sit in the congregation. So, I can't ascribe to be in the traditional church, so I believe I'm stuck in the in between. However, though, one of the things that I've noticed is the decline, is the migration of youth out of the traditional church into these other two areas. And so we need to get to the bottom of this. Maybe there is some reason for this transition. So what do we have what do we have for our guests today?
So what we did was we said, okay, you know what? We've got to talk to somebody who might have a understanding and a feel for what's going on. And it's somebody who is connected to both sides, right? He is somebody that we know has ties to traditional church, but he also has ties to the modern day church. He had his own blog spot. I don't know if he still has it. He'll talk to us about it, but he has his own blog spot. He's got his little business going on. So it's a very good young man that is actually a part of this show. No other person than Sean Gore. Come on.
Welcome to this Sean Gore.
Sean Gore.
We finally got you on the show.
Finally got you to get on. Woo! It's been difficult, but thank God we got you on now.
Are you gonna tell why I couldn't be on the show in the past, or we just gonna leave that between us?
I will leave it alone. I won't go there for you. I will leave that alone.
Well, I'm gonna jump right into this. So Minister Sean Gore, would you take a couple minutes and just kind of introduce yourself to our audience, because I look at you as one of those young men who seems to be having some some connection across the broad spectrum of within the church world. So share with our audience briefly a few things about yourself.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Gore. I am originally from New Jersey. I attended the great Morgan State University, where I got a degree in philosophy with a concentration in religious studies. I am a member of Transformation Church, where my pastor is Bishop Monroe R. Saunders. I am a licensed minister there. I am also a part of the great organization United Church of Jesus Christ Apostolic, and my role there is the Young Adult Department President. I'm also a business owner. I have started a social media marketing company called SPG Marketing Solutions that's geared towards churches, Christian leaders, Christian conferences, for marketing on social media. I think that sums me up. I would like to think of myself as just a all-around good guy. That's what.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Oh, really?
You know,
heard that overseer? Oh, really?
You know how we dropped overseer? I go to the presiding bishop's church. Bishop Monroe's house.
I didn't say.
Oh!
I mean, he is my presiding bishop,
Yes.
but I left that out there. But you know.
Yes. Okay. All right, man. All right. So we get it, and it's great to have you on the show. Bishop, do you want to shoot him the first question? So I know it's a deep show, so we might have a lot of questions and comments. So let's get right to it.
Well, the first question I'd like to ask you, Minister Gore, is in light of our conversation on tonight, where do you place yourself in today's youth culture? What church do you think that you mostly fit in? And just remember that the presider is listening.
No pressure, right? So I feel like I am a mix between. And I say that because there are principles of a traditional church that I won't say I ascribe to, but I have a preference for. And there are also principles of modern day churches that I have a preference for as well. So for me, give example or give context to that, when it comes to church style, church culture, I'm very much into traditional churches where there are certain aspects of a standard, and I hate using that word, but standard, we'll use that as a preference and we'll talk about this later, but I don't think standard has been used by the church correctly, but we'll get back to that. So there are certain principles that are practices that I agree with from traditional churches, but I like the style of modern churches and the resources that they use. So that's why I would call myself an in-between.
Okay. So then Sean, then tell me this. What do you say is the difference then in the position of today's youth and the current leadership of, let's say, a traditional church? Or even maybe this like to the in-between, but closer to traditional.
I think the main difference is this generation of millennials and Generation Z are going to easily follow principles that are placed without biblical application or explanation. I think for years in the past, many generations just follow what the pastor said without asking any questions. But millennials, and especially Generation Z, I know people always talk about millennials, but millennials, okay. But Generation Z asks way more questions than millennials do. And Generation Z are very much authentic in who they are, where I think in past generations, there's been a level of inauthenticity. And the reason I say that is because in a lot of times in the past, other generations may not have agreed with certain principles and knew they were biblically inaccurate, but they still followed it. Where Generation Z and even millennials are not going to follow something that is explained as a biblical principle that is inaccurate. So I think that's the biggest tension or difference between today's traditional church leaders and youth and young adults of today. And let me put this blanket statement out there. I'm not speaking for all youth and young adults. I am just giving an overall arch, but the reality is there is a big spectrum of youth and young adults within the Black traditional Pentecostal Apostolic Church. So for me to say this is for all of them would be inaccurate and inaccurate. It would be an inaccurate portrayal of the dynamics of youth and young adults.
Right, and we want to make sure. I'm glad you said that, because we want to make sure we understands that Sean is not speaking for everybody. He's speaking as an opinion of the based on his conversations with others. So we're just going to give it. And so if you have a comment or a question that you want to drive to us to further the conversation, maybe you might have a different opinion. Please put in the comment section. If we have time, we'll definitely get to it. But Sean, I want to touch a different point, because you said something that I want to clarify. So when you say biblically inaccurate, do you mean that they've studied it and they're saying it's inaccurate, or are you saying they believe it to be inaccurate because they heard it from somebody else?
I think it's a combination of both. I think we live in a church culture now, especially for more non-traditional churches, where it's been preached on the pulpit a lot that things of the past were inaccurate or they weren't properly taught. So I think I'm not going to say that. I think some youth and young adults take that and don't research it for themselves. And then I think there are a lot of youth and young adults who do research it for themselves and see the contradictions in the Bible that would apply to certain biblical principles that make them realize that maybe this is a little off.
Well, but again, Minister Gore, let me ask that, because
you just call me Sean.
you are giving me a kind of educational point. I thought that the tension between the youth and the traditional church is because the leaders, the fathers, have not opened up access for the youth to be a part. And they want to come on in, and we're sitting or standing in the places that they would like to take.
Well, I think that plays a part in it, but I don't think that is a necessarily only a leader issue. I think that is a church culture issue. I believe this generation, or the generation before us, no offense, hasn't properly trained this generation for some reason. And also there's a lack of mentorship and impartation that has taken place. So as a result, youth and young adults in a lot of our churches are searching for that, and where they're able to find it, they'll move there.
But would you agree with me, Minister Gore, that as far as mentorship is concerned, or is that falls on the risk in the lap of the one that is aspiring mentorship?
No,
as opposed,
we've had this conversation.
As opposed to the elders to be reaching out to dish out mentorship to you. If you desire to be mentored, aren't you supposed to be looking? And so I thought that it was my belief that the youth were exiting because they were not being given positions of leadership, positions of authority, and so they think that they can go and find it elsewhere.
But I think that's the inaccurate thought process, that it all sponsors around leadership roles. And while that may be true for some youth and young adults, I don't think that is necessarily the key. I think it is more so training. If I'm in a church and I feel God calling me to a certain office or position, and I go to my pastor, and this has happened to I've heard this through numerous conversations. I go to my pastor and they don't do anything to train me, or the bare minimum. That creates a tension right there. So I think that is a big part. And to counteract your statement about the mentee having to reach out to the mentor, if we follow the principles of Jesus, when he picked all the disciples, he called them to follow him because he saw what was in them. So I think remember, let me finish. As a leader, if you see something into someone, instead of having them come to you,
Sean's
You as
right.
the leader need to reach out to them and pull them to you.
But that's the point I'm making. Jesus never called anyone that was not working. When the Lord
But
said to Elijah, "Go find Elisha," what was Elijah doing?
he
He
was
was
working.
plowing.
90% of these
What
young
were the fishermen
I
doing?
won't say, but I won't say 90. A lot of percent of these youth and young adults who are leaving traditional churches aren't your lay members. And that's why it's being felt so hard at these churches. It's the ones that are working and really putting in the effort and don't feel that they're being invested into as a result. And
Wow.
and a lot,
Overseer,
and I'll say this, and a lot of times they feel like the only time they get checked up on or called or reached out to is when something is needed from them, and not just a regular conversation like, hey, how are you? How's your day going? How's life? How's your marriage? How's single life? The only time you as a leader are calling your youth or young adult, especially in leadership, is when you need something. That is a major issue. And that is a part of the issue with this generation and the traditional churches.
So let me ask one question. Don't you think that the leaders that you're looking on, they themselves has actually passed through the same situations that you don't? Okay, all right.
I mean, because I've heard testimonies of these leaders talking about how much of an investment the generation before them invested in them, which also makes it very interesting why this dynamic has been created. I'm trying to word my words. I've just heard leaders who talk about the one-on-one time they've received with their mentors and how they've invested so much into them. But it's just very interesting to me how that dynamic has been passed on to this generation.
That's very interesting because, Overseer, you and I had a conversation, and the overseer told me that he needed a mentor on 2 occasions that I have personal experience with Overseer Rupert. He needed a mentor in Bishop Nelson, and he reached out. He needed a mentor within Presider, and he just picked up the phone and called the overseer. Would you enlighten Minister Gore on that effective role of?
What is that? So, are you saying that because he reached out, that's why he was mentored? Is that what you're saying?
I'm asking him to share that. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything.
Hold on, guys. Hold on.
Maybe we should give them context of our
relationship. This is not the mentor show. What was going on with mentors? We can dive in. We already had this discussion for hours. Okay, let's make sure we have a whole bunch. Okay, so Sean believes that the leadership of today should look for strong, qualified young people and help them navigate ministry, right?
I do.
Bishop is just saying that he believes that these young, motivated, qualified young folks should also seek that. So let's just leave it at that because you're too opinion. All right.
So I will say this. So what do you say to the youth or young adult who has reached out? Yeah, and there is no change in the relationship.
No, that's a different argument. And we want to remind the young people that
I just asked the question. What do you say to them?
No, good question. I would say to them, keep trying. There is a mentor in that house for you. It might not be the pastor, it might be the assistant pastor, it might be one of the elders, ministers, it could be one of the fathers or elders. A lot of times we think it has to be the pastor who is going to mentor you, but you might recall that even pastors have mentors in their church sometimes, people who've been there for a while that they can talk to and say, you know what, this is going on, and get their experience. Many times the mothers are pastors' mentor. So I think that that young person shouldn't give up. There's somebody in there for them. Sometimes the pastor has other things going on that they cannot give them that quality time that they're seeking. That's what I would say. Okay. That's what I would do. But there are some questions. I don't want to bypass folks who have. We have a whole bunch, but there are some questions out there that we want to get to. So let's put one of them up, and then we'll ask this. So they're asking you then, Sean, how do you incorporate the traditional church and principles with today's youth so they can be more involved? And I guess mentorship would be one, but what other things maybe that you can think of?
So one thing I would advise is having them operate in service. I think a lot of times we feel like, and I had a conversation with a bishop yesterday, and he talked about at his church, he made sure that the youth and young adults were involved within the service. And the reality is a lot of times we don't want to he said, a lot of times we don't want to put them up in front of people because they're not trained or we don't feel like they're ready. But the reality is the only way they're going to learn is by doing it. And he said something that was very, very, very profound, and I really thought it was admirable. He said one thing he talks about with the prophets in his church. He said he encourages the younger prophets to go ahead. And he said, one thing I tell them is that even if you get it wrong, I'll correct it and we'll talk about it later. But I still want you to get in the practice of being able to speak what God says to the people. So I think that's the biggest principle we can do is actually having them operate in our churches. And also, I think when we talk about traditional principles, I think we have to make sure they understand the tenets of our faith. I think a lot of times because we've grown up in this, or children have grown up in them, we think they know just because we stress it. But I think there hasn't always been proper teaching, especially as an apostolic, of what we believe. Thankfully, I feel like I know. But I think for other people, there hasn't been a necessary training and understanding of what we believe, because reality is once they get to college, everything they've learned through church is going to be tested. And the reality is if they aren't trained on what they believe, it's going to be easily uprooted, because they're going to not only deal with different Christian faiths, they're going to also be facing different religions. And if they don't have a full deep-rooted understanding of why we believe Jesus Christ saves and Jesus Christ is the way, then that is going to be easily uprooted, especially in this woke culture. And I don't want to denigrate it, or I don't want to disintegrate it or like make it sound bad. But the reality is there is a culture that is in the world today, especially with African Americans, that really embraces traditional African roots and is basically turning away from Christianity under the principle that Christianity is the white man's religion. So if people don't understand the fact that in Ethiopia, there was Christianity before slavery was even a thing. So I think we have to make sure that we are teaching and instilling biblical principles. But I think the key is biblical principles, not standard preferences. And I think that's the difference. I think we also have to get away from preaching standard preferences as biblical truths. Just because you want your church to dress a certain way or do things a certain way doesn't mean that a church down the street that isn't saved. And I think we as the apostolic church have, I'm not trying to be that guy.
No, I think we have gotten away from that though.
Okay, you can think that.
I think within we have gotten away from.
But the question is, we're talking about traditional churches. Traditional churches haven't gotten away from that.
Right.
Yeah.
You remember, Bishop, you said you're not a traditional church. Remember, You said you're the in-between. So he's talking about the straight traditional churches, and he's right. They haven't really got
but because I may be in between doesn't mean that there is not traditional folks within the traditional context within the church.
Right.
What I'm saying, but those individuals over years have gotten to understand
but that's
that there has to be an allowance as I would say, don't scale a fish before you actually catch it.
But I think that's because of your leadership.
Right.
Every traditional pastor isn't teaching that if the saints down the street don't do things the same way you do or look the same way you do, that they're still saved.
All right. Let's kind of get. I know you're going overseer. There's another question from
We got another one. Yes. What advice can you give to church leaders who are getting questions about Christianity and God in general from their young members and newcomers?
Well, I mean, I kind of feel like I touched that a little bit. Just making sure. Well, first, as a leader, you need to know about Christianity and God. But I think also just training them and just being open to questions and being honest. If you don't know the answer, tell them that and tell them I'm going to find out the answer. And then I think also another key is creating dialogue. I think a lot of churches are open to dialogue when it comes to questions. And I think also other more traditional churches need to realize questions aren't a sign of defiance. Questions are a sign of trying to gain understanding.
That's good.
I think you're right on the nose. I think that's a big one that I totally agree with. You cannot look at them questioning something as being a radical turn. It's something that they want to know, and we have to hit the question. Okay, great.
Now I want to ask Minister Gore. So Minister Gore, now since you are here and kind of more or less advocating that you have kind of thought this through, for a young person that is on the call tonight, that is contemplating leaving their place of their home church and thinking about going elsewhere, what kind of advice would you give to that person?
I feel like I've had this conversation multiple times, especially within the last 2 years. So my first advice would be pray about it. The reality.
That's a standard church answer.
Let me finish. Thank you. The second thing is I would say have a conversation with your pastor.
Oh, we can't talk to him. He's traditional.
I don't think anyone should leave their church without having a conversation with their pastor. That's just me.
I'm glad you say that. That is exactly what I want you to say. Keep going.
Oh, so this is a test to see.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the third thing is to check your motives of why you're leaving.
Beautiful.
I'm glad I got your approval. But those would be my advice.
But you could have said, don't leave, because you are there.
I'm not going to tell nobody not to leave. Like, I personally don't feel like I am in a place to tell someone where to go to church, especially. Well, I'll just say that I'm not in a place to tell somebody where or where not to go to church.
Good point. Now we got this comment from one of your buddies. I know
that's my brother.
That's one of your buddies out here saying facts. I love how they dropped the facts. See, we didn't have those words. We just said for real. They were facts. The workers are leaving because they feel all we want is their gift, and we are not pouring into them. And you kind of said that, right? You said that a lot of time we only get them when we need them, right? We only go to say, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. But we're not taking the time to sit them down and to express, something more. I need you to understand this. I had a benefit, okay? So I'm a little different. My daddy was my pastor. My daddy was a bishop. So whenever I did anything, I took the car ride home and I got the lesson, right? Because driving my car, I would just say, okay, what's up, Dad? How'd I preach? How'd I do this? Right? And he would give it to me. But not every young person has that, right? Everybody's daddy is not the pastor. Everybody's daddy's not, they're not driving one of their pastors. So Sean, this is kind of my question for you then, and it goes outside of our questions, but how, let's say you did have to, or you did want that. You didn't want to leave your church. You didn't want to go someplace else. You didn't want to find somebody else. But the minister, the pastor, is not giving you that time.
And I'm going to say this as a footnote. I'll dare say 85% of the people who are workers in their church who don't really want to leave. I think we need to also take account of that. Like a lot of them, it's a struggle because I've had this conversation with multiple people. And the reality is for a lot of them, it is like, I really don't want to leave, but I feel like I need to leave for ... So to say, sorry, can you repeat the question?
So my question is just how would you as a young man kind of say, well, you know what, I need to develop some skills? What 3 things that might you do to develop those skills outside of an overall mentor? If you have that. I mean, it's a tough question to come up right off the bat.
Yeah, it is a tough question. I'm glad you acknowledged that.
Yeah.
So one of the things is thank God for the internet. I can speak for myself when it came to different ministry assignments, and that sounds so churchy, but it is what it is. Ministry assignments, YouTube and the internet has been a friend of mine. So thank God for that. I'm just trying to think of what other. So then also, if you don't have a mentor, if you have people who are around your age who are doing things that you aspire to, they can have conversations with them about how to do what they're doing or whatever you need to do. I hope I can't really think of any more answers.
So overseer, let me speak to those youth that are pouring out so much of their gift and their talents within ministry, right? And feel as if that they need to leave because all leadership wants is just their gifting. Have they ever thought, and I'm asking Minister Gore, have they ever thought to leverage their gifting within the church? Let me give you an example from my own personal experience. My personal experience was in United. I've been men's, youth, men, all throughout the organization, working many different capacity. But one of the things that I was able to do, which I think all working, talented ministers, including yourself, can do, is leverage your gifting. So when my term was up as the men's president, I had a sit down with the presider. Sit down evaluation. I requested being a mentor. I've given out my gifting, right? As you said, I've extended my talents. So I went to the presider and I sat down and have a conversation with him in more or less discussing now that I have been effective in helping the men's ministry, Bishop, this is what I would love for you to do for me. So you ask me, why does these talented young men and young women that you're talking about have not used that as a means to achieve or to get to where they would want to go rather than leaving the organization or leaving their church?
Well, before you go there, I think this question is a good question. And it leads to the point which you're talking about. And I'm going to add something to it because this talks about leaving. But how do you conduct a one-sided conversation about anything with a leader who doesn't want to talk? The silence comes over the crowd because that's a hard one, right? How do you have a one-sided conversation with somebody who doesn't want to give you the time of day? Bishop, you said you talked with the presider. That's because the presider said, yes, come to my office. But what happened if you kept calling and kept calling?
Yeah, but overseer, what I was trying to get at, the point I was getting across was I created the opportunity to have a conversation by leveraging, by giving up of my gift and ability towards achieving something that the presider desire.
Well,
You see, the thing is, I'm thinking I'm thinking that a lot of young folks are looking at it from their perspective. They're trying to do things for themselves as opposed to spend some time doing something for the folks and then use it as a leverage.
But we just said they're workers of the church.
Go ahead, Sean. You can respond. Go ahead, Sean. You respond now because Bishop's trying to get you stuck. You go ahead and you respond. You show.
So first of all, we already established that these are workers. So that point is null and void.
No. But I'm saying you're not leveraging the work that you have done.
Let him finish.
So also, I think we have to take into account people have different personality types. And Bishop Brown, I love you very much, but you are a very persistent and precise person. Everyone isn't like that, and you are very.
You need to stop there. You're online.
Go get him.
I was gonna say you're very non-passive. So if you feel something, if you really feel something heavy about something, you are going to be vocal about it.
Talk about it.
And I think everybody isn't like that. And I think God created us all differently for a purpose. So everybody isn't going to feel comfortable leveraging their ministry assignment for whatever they feel like God is pushing next to them. Also, I think that is kind of not in line with what we're saying, because there's going to be a fallout if they are pushed in that position without mentorship. You've had great mentors, Bishop Dyer being one of them.
Can I help you? Can I help you on this one, Sean? Can I help you for a second?
Sure.
What happens when that young man or young lady go and are persistent, and maybe the leader may suddenly catch an eye, but everybody else say, oh, they think they're something special. Why don't they wait their turn? Why don't they do this? Now they're being talked about because all they want to do is use their ministry. But now there's folks, as you know, folks do this. Don't act like you don't. Folks,
no,
don't.
We do. But I mean, I think that is another conversation. And I think as you grow in ministry, you have to get to the point where you are allowing things to roll off your back. And it's funny you said this because
I disagree. You never have to let things roll off your back.
No, but I'll just say this. I've been praying.
But I don't want. That's what this conversation is about. Okay. But I don't think that's what should happen. It may happen. That's not what should happen.
I think for me, I've been, and it's funny that we're talking about this, and we can get back to the conversation. But lately, I've been praying to God not to take things so personally. And I think that is, as a person in leadership and in ministry, you're going to have to realize that you can't take things personally. And it's been tested. It's really funny. It's been tested as of late. But you can't take things personally, and you have to be able to, I think you have to be able to let things roll off your back, because if you don't, then you will take things to heart and continually be offended.
You can't take criticism about what you're doing personally, but you should not be criticized for wanting to do. There's a difference.
But that's not church. That's the reality of the culture.
Right, but I'm saying but church isn't the world. And there's a way to do church and the way to be a Christian and activate. We are meant to encourage. Let me not get into this whole.
Do we have any more questions over here? Any more questions?
We don't have much time. We got a few different comments.
Yes.
Let's see. Exactly. Not only that's another question. Let me ask one of our questions. Okay. So.
Oh wait, but did we answer the question that was at the bottom?
Yeah, we answered
the one-sided.
Oh yeah, no, we really didn't answer that. Okay, so what do you think about how do you deal with somebody who as a leader only wants to have a one-sided conversation? What do you cope? How do you make a way? Let me ask this: is it prevalent though? Do you have a lot of leaders, or is it a few leaders out there, or is it many leaders who don't want to have the conversation?
So I think there's a spectrum of leaders, and I've had conversations with different people who have dealt with the spectrum. I've had people who had conversations with leaders that were like, don't go, this isn't God, you need to stay here. Then I've had conversations with pastors who were kind of like, gave a nonchalant feel to it, which I think is mistaken. I think the reality is some pastors just feel like I'm not going to force you to do anything. So I think there has to be, so to answer the question, the original question, and then I'll get back to that. To answer the question, I think you should make the attempt to have the conversation. And I think this is going to maybe sound bad, but I think we also have to realize that each person has their own relationship with God. And if God is telling you something and you know it's God, you just got to follow the voice of the Lord and just, and I'm not going to say like disobey leadership, but you have to follow God and just know without a shadow of a doubt that this is the leading of God and I am being obedient to the voice of the Lord. And as long as you had that conversation with your leader, at that point, I think it alleviates you from any wrongdoing as long as you are following God's voice.
The question that I would then come up with to you is, how do you know it's God and not you?
Well, I think God speaks to everyone differently, so I can't give an answer to that. I think as your relationship grows, you know certain things where it is God. And
But if you weren't mentored, how do you know it's God? Because even Samuel, if you weren't mentored, how do you know it's God? Because even Samuel had a mentor. He said, Eli, Eli, I heard something. Were you calling me? Go to your room.
But I was about to say, also, I believe God will send confirmation. And the reality is, even though Samuel didn't know that was the voice of the Lord, Eli established that was for him and created confirmation for him that God was speaking to him. So I believe
his mentor, though.
Say that again?
Eli was his mentor, though.
Yeah, but Eli wasn't training him well enough that he didn't know, because he didn't know the voice of God.
It was 6.
You know, this is a great hey, this is a great conversation, but we're running out of time here, and we're running out of time, and we want to bring in, again, Minister Gore, want to say thank you so much for coming on, to taking this is a huge challenge, and again, we want to thank our audience for those who have shared questions and those who are keenly listening. And we believe that we're going to have you back on again, because we definitely just begin to scratch the surface of this discussion, because there are some other more even in-depth challenging question that I have. But again, with the tyranny of the clock. So we just want to say thank you, but we want to ask you to share any last words that you may have that you would want to share with especially with the youth that are listening, to encourage them. Encouraging them. And I love what you're saying about making sure you have that conversation with your leadership before you even step outside. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I just want to. This is just came to mind. I think young adults need to know, and youth and young adults, that your work isn't in vain. And even if your pastor or your leader doesn't acknowledge you, God sees what you're doing, and God is faithful, and He will reward you openly. And that's kind of the preference, the point that I want to drive that. I know you're frustrated. I know you feel like your work is in vain, but it's not. And you never know whose life you're impacting, even in the midst of a frustrated season in your life.
Thank you, Overseer. Thank you. Yes.
Sean, great job, man. You did really great. You represented your generation very well. I want to say that. We weren't easy on you. You really did a good job. So I'm impressed. I'm impressed with your generation, and I'm glad that you took the time to come and debate with us on some of these topics. What we got to do next time is we got to get one of those old mothers of the church on with Sean and have them go at it. That's going to be a 2-hour show right there. But thank you, everybody, for coming on.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Bad Man for Christ, every Monday, 7:15. Please subscribe. Please like. Please make sure you join us. We have great guests like this coming on each week. and we look forward to having greater conversations. So God bless you all. Bishop, any last words?
Yes, just thank you so much for being on, and we truly appreciate that. Thanks again, Minister Gore, for coming on. God bless you, and enjoy the week until we meet back here next Monday night at 7:15. God bless you, and have a great, great week.
Take care.
Take care.
Bad Man, LB, Rupert, Albert, and the Bishop Paul Brown. Bad Man for the 2020-2021. And you know what it is. You know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego too. This is Paul and Rupert and we're the new crew. We're coming out with a brand new thought, covered under the blood in which we were born. So we know how to get to where we want to go with the love of